It was still dark when he stepped outside, the kind of cold that cracks the air. Mr. Halbrook leaned on his shovel, eyes on the snowdrift swallowing the sidewalk across the street. Her house. Light still off. She had a toddler. He'd heard. No husband. No salt on the steps. He crossed the road. Each scoop was slow but steady. No one watched. No one asked. The wind whispered behind him, but he kept moving. One path. Clear enough for 2 feet, one stroller. Across the street, curtains shifted, then closed. The next morning, it snowed again. He came again. This time, someone saw. A man pulling into his driveway, coffee in hand. He glanced once, then looked away. Shut the car door. Went inside. Just a quiet old man with a shovel. Nothing worth stopping for. Where in the world are you watching from? Has someone ever done something quietly kind for you, without asking for thanks? Share your story in the comments, and tell us where kindness found you. This is just part 0. Stay with us. The snow's only beginning to melt. Mr. Halbrook's mornings were always the same. At precisely 5:30 a.m., he stepped out of his weathered cottage, wrapped a second scarf around his neck, and began his slow walk down Maple Lane. He didn't need an alarm clock. His body, like the clock tower at City Hall, had kept time perfectly for years. Each step was deliberate, not from pain, but from patience. He greeted the empty street like an old friend. His neighbors knew him as the old postman, even though most had never seen him deliver a single letter. That part of his life was long behind him, retired 20 years now. But his walk, his silence, and the way he noticed things, that stayed. On the corner of Maple and Sycamore, a house with a broken mailbox always made him pause. Once he had fixed it quietly, tying it up with wire and sealing the post with epoxy. The next morning it was torn down and replaced with a brand new one. No one said a word. That suited him just fine. Each morning he brought something with him. A plastic bag to pick up trash, a biscuit for the neighborhood dog, a note for the elderly widow in number 14, who often forgot what day it was. He'd leave the note taped to her porch. It's Thursday. Your son calls on Thursdays. He didn't expect thanks, and rarely got any. His coat had a permanent dusting of salt at the hem. His gloves were patched in 3 places, and his boots had soles worn so smooth he could feel the sidewalk. He walked like a man who had no place urgent to be, and maybe that's why people overlooked him. What they didn't know was that he was the last person in the neighborhood to see Mrs. Fontana alive. She had fallen in her backyard, near the garden, in the middle of March. He'd heard something odd, a rhythm that didn't belong to the wind. He turned, looked over her fence, and saw her struggling to crawl. He never told anyone, just called 911 and stayed with her until they came. When she passed 3 days later, her daughter asked the neighbors if anyone had seen her that day. No one spoke up. He didn't either. Every Saturday, he bought 2 loaves of bread, one for himself. The other he left hanging in a plastic bag on someone else's door. Never the same house twice. He rotated quietly. People began to joke about the bread fairy. Some thought it was a prank. Others assumed it was a food pantry. No one guessed it was the man they passed every morning, nodding politely, who once walked their mail up 3 flights of stairs so it wouldn't get wet. He spent Sunday afternoons at the local park, sitting on the same bench. Sometimes he fed pigeons. Sometimes he just sat, hands folded, eyes watching, not judging, just taking in. Once, a child approached him with a toy airplane that had snapped in 2. The boy looked up with wide eyes and trembling lips. Mr. Halbrook took the pieces without a word, pulled a small roll of tape from his coat pocket, and began to mend the wing. 10 minutes later, the plane flew again. The child ran off, never even asking his name. That was fine. The man didn't carry a phone, didn't own a television. His radio played jazz in the mornings and weather updates in the evenings. He read the newspaper cover to cover. 3 days old, usually, picked up cheap from the local diner. But he never missed the obituaries. He circled names, lit candles, whispered goodbyes. Once, during a storm, the power went out across the neighborhood, while others stayed indoors, candles flickering behind drawn curtains. Mr. Halbrook walked door to door with extra batteries and 2 camping lanterns. He left them without knocking. He was the kind of man who remembered the birthdays of people who forgot his, who wrote letters for those too tired to hold a pen, who noticed when a curtain stayed shut too long, and rang the bell twice, just in case. But still, when people saw him walking, they assumed he was just out for fresh air. When they passed him, they smiled politely and kept going. They didn't ask his name. They never stopped to wonder how he knew so much about them. He knew who had just lost a job, who had skipped 3 meals this week, who pretended they weren't lonely, and who was just holding on. He knew, and he remembered. He wasn't bitter about being invisible. He understood people didn't mean harm. They were busy, distracted, wrapped in their own noise. Still, there was a quiet ache sometimes when he watched families gather and heard laughter echo through windows. Sometimes he stood still at dusk, eyes on the houses as lights flicked on one by one, and whispered, "Good night," even if you don't know I'm saying it. He never knocked on doors. He didn't insert himself where he wasn't wanted. He just watched, helped when he could, stepped away when he wasn't needed anymore. And so, when he cleared her walkway that morning, when the snow reached the mailbox and no tire tracks had touched her drive, he didn't expect her to see, or thank him, or even remember. He just didn't want her to slip. That's all. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't have guessed, was that someone else did see. Someone small. Someone curious. And that would change everything. The next morning came with wind sharp enough to rattle shutters. Snow had fallen again, softer this time, but enough to blanket everything in silence. The street was empty, no cars, no children, just the crunch of ice underfoot as Mr. Halbrook stepped outside. He didn't hesitate. He crossed the road again, shovel in hand. The same house, the same path. And again he cleared it. He was halfway through when a curtain flicked. Just for a moment. Then stillness. He didn't expect anything more. He finished, leaned on the shovel a moment, and looked up at the pale gray sky. No thanks came. No knock. No voice. Just the gentle settling of snowfall behind him. Across the street, the single mother stood behind the curtain. Her name was Megan. Her daughter, Lila, was 5. Megan had barely slept again. Lila had woken up coughing, and the medicine was nearly gone. Megan's paycheck wouldn't come for another 2 days. And the last thing on her mind was the snow. She had seen him the day before, but only barely. A coat, a scarf, a shovel moving like a metronome. She'd assumed it was someone hired by the city. She certainly hadn't expected him to return. And then he did. Quietly. Without ringing the bell. Without asking permission. She stared now through the glass, one hand pressed to the window, her daughter asleep on the couch behind her. She wanted to say something, but by the time she gathered the will to open the door, he was gone. The path was clean again. A week passed. The snow kept coming, and so did Mr. Halbrook. Every other morning, like clockwork. Sometimes in heavier coats. Sometimes with a flashlight. Always quiet. Always early. Megan began to wait. Not out of expectation, but out of curiosity. Who was he? Why was he doing this? She asked her neighbor, Mrs. Patel. The old man. The one with the quiet shoes? Oh, Mrs. Patel said. He helped me when my husband passed. I didn't ask. He just left soup on my porch. Megan blinked. Did you ever thank him? I don't think I knew it was him at the time, Mrs. Patel admitted. He never says much. So Megan made muffins. Cinnamon and apple, her daughter's favorite. She wrapped them in foil, placed them in a paper bag, and left it by the door with a note. Thank you, whoever you are. But the bag was still there at noon. The foil cold. Untouched. It didn't make sense. Because that morning, the walk had been cleared again. The next time it snowed, she waited on the steps with a coat and boots. She told herself she was just going to say thanks. That was all. Just words. Quick, polite. But again, she missed him. He was like a ghost. Until the morning she didn't. It was earlier than usual. The sky barely lit. Lila had woken coughing again, and Megan went to warm water for her. That's when she heard it. The scrape of metal against cement. She rushed to the door, opened it gently, and there he was. Old coat, leather gloves, breath puffing in the air. He paused, looked up, and smiled faintly. "You don't have to," she began. He raised a hand. Not to interrupt, just to acknowledge. "It's okay," he said. "I saw you had your hands full. I could pay you," she offered. "No need," he said simply. "Why?" she asked. He looked at the porch, at the frosted toys scattered near the steps. "Because someone once did this for my wife. A long time ago." Then he went back to shoveling. Megan stood there, speechless, for longer than she meant to. When she finally stepped back inside, Lila was awake. "Was that the snow fairy?" the little girl asked. Megan almost said no. But then she looked out again, saw the way he moved, not fast, not strong, but consistent, gentle, and she nodded. Maybe. That night, Lila drew a picture. A man with a scarf and a smile, holding a shovel, standing next to a house. She taped it to the door. He never said a word about it, but he did smile a little longer the next morning. Word began to spread, quietly, the way soft snow spreads across rooftops. One neighbor asked Megan if the old man had helped her too. Another said they saw him fixing a loose board on a porch. Someone else mentioned a bag of batteries that had appeared during a blackout. "He just shows up," one woman said, "and helps. But no one ever really talks to him," another added. "He doesn't seem to mind." But Megan did. She started watching for him, not to catch him, but to understand. What kind of man spent his mornings helping strangers and vanished before sunrise? She noticed how he walked with care, how he looked at houses as if remembering something important. She saw the way he stepped aside for dogs, for trash bins, for even the smallest piece of sidewalk chalk a child had left behind. He respected space. He honored silence. One morning, Megan invited him in for coffee. He politely declined, said he didn't want to wake the house. But she left a thermos out for him the next time. It was gone by noon. She didn't ask if he took it. She didn't need to. And still, the gesture faded. Not because she forgot it, but because life kept moving. The weather warmed. The snow stopped. Lila's cough disappeared. School started again. Megan returned to work. The thermos was stored away. The drawing came off the door. And just like that, the man with the shovel faded into the blur of early mornings and busy afternoons. She never thanked him again. Not properly. She thought of it often. Meant to say more. But life is built on the things we mean to do. Until one spring morning, when she saw an ambulance across the street. A quiet moment. A man on a stretcher. A paramedic holding a slip of paper and squinting. No one around. Her heart stopped. And the muffins, the scarf, the drawing, everything she thought she'd forgotten, came rushing back. The ambulance pulled away slowly, its lights flashing but siren off, the kind of quiet emergency that doesn't wake the neighborhood, only whispers that something is wrong. Megan stood across the street, her hand still on the fence post. Her heart wasn't racing. It had stopped, then sunk. That was him. She knew it. She crossed the street as the last of the EMTs packed up. No one stopped her. The driver gave her a glance, saw something familiar in her eyes, and nodded toward the clipboard. "Halbrook, right?" she asked. The EMT nodded. "Yeah. Slipped on black ice behind his house. We think he was out there a while before someone noticed." That someone had been the mail carrier, ironically. The only one who walked the route anymore. "Is he alive?" "But cold. Disoriented. We'll know more at the hospital." She thanked him, but the words came out hollow. The man who never asked for anything was now alone, behind ambulance doors, surrounded by strangers who didn't know he folded paper bags to reuse, or that he kept a list of birthdays for people who'd stopped remembering his. Megan didn't go back inside. She stood on the porch, eyes fixed on the place where the shovel used to rest against the wall. Snow was long gone, but she remembered its shape perfectly. By evening, word had spread. "Did you hear about the old postman? The one who helped everyone. Thought he had no one." It was a strange kind of grief, not loud, not even present, just an echo of something missing. People didn't cry. They paused. That night, Megan sat Lila down and tried to explain. "Remember the man who used to shovel our walk?" Lila nodded, legs swinging off the couch. "He got hurt," Megan said gently. The little girl was quiet for a long time, then whispered, "We should visit him." He didn't have a drawing. In the hospital, the staff didn't know what to make of him. No emergency contact. No family listed. No visitors. He wasn't unconscious, just quiet. Answered questions, nodded politely. But he asked nothing. He's calm, a nurse said. But there's something about his eyes. They're used to being alone, another replied. The next day, Megan came with a bouquet of daffodils, freshly cut from her backyard. She asked for Mr. Halbrook's room. The nurse looked surprised. You're here for him? I am. She was led through a quiet hallway. When she entered, he was sitting up, hands folded, eyes on the window. He didn't look surprised. Didn't think anyone would notice, he said softly. I noticed, she replied, placing the flowers on the table. You didn't have to come. You didn't have to shovel my walk either. He smiled faintly. Fair enough. There was silence. Not awkward. Just full. I'm sorry, she said. I should have said thank you sooner. He didn't say it was okay. He didn't wave it off. He just looked at her, really looked. The way only someone who notices everything can. You were tired, he said. That child needed you more. The line was gentle, but it pierced something in her chest. He had never asked for thanks. Never once implied she owed him anything. And yet, she realized now, what hurt wasn't that he was ignored. It was that no one had ever stepped in to carry his weight, even once. Later that evening, a staff member came to check on him and found a small line had formed in the hallway. One by one, neighbors had arrived, some with soup, others with books, photos, or just words. No big speeches, just presence. Even Mr. Anders, who barely left his recliner, came by with an old envelope. He mailed this from years ago. Didn't ask for postage. A janitor paused and added quietly, He gave me gloves last winter when mine tore. I didn't even know his name. The hospital didn't know where to file these visits. They weren't relatives. Most didn't even know his first name. But they came. Back at home, Lila taped her second drawing on the door. This time, the man was lying in a hospital bed with flowers and stars around him. He's a hero, she told her mom. No, Megan replied gently. He's just good. And that's harder. Still, for all the kindness now flowing back, there were those who began rewriting the story. He was strange, wasn't he? Kind of too quiet. You never know with people like that. Someone even suggested he was doing it all for attention. That maybe he wanted recognition after all. Megan heard these words while waiting in the hospital cafe. A group at the next table, whispering, half laughing. The kind of judgment people throw when they're too uncomfortable to care deeply. She didn't say anything. Just rose from her chair, picked up her tray, and paused by their table. He did more for this town than any of you ever will, she said. And he never asked for a damn thing. She didn't wait for a reply. Later that night, in his hospital room, Mr. Halbrook chuckled when she told him, I don't need defending. I know, Megan said, but I needed to say it. He nodded. They crossed a line, she added, and they don't even know it. He looked out the window. They never do. Outside, snow had started falling again, the soft, floating kind that settles on your shoulders like memories you forgot were there. Inside, the man who had always walked ahead of the storm now had people walking beside him, and none of them were ready to walk away. The days that followed blurred together in quiet tones, hospital lighting, hushed voices, the soft beep of machines. Mr. Halbrook stayed mostly still, speaking only when spoken to, never asking when he'd go home. The nurses called him the gentle one. They'd grown used to his nods, his gratitude and glances. What no one expected was how many people kept visiting. Each afternoon, a new face would appear at the front desk, asking quietly, Room 114? At first it was just Megan and her daughter. Then it was Mrs. Patel with a jar of chai and a folded newspaper. Then the man from the bakery. Then the child with the toy airplane. Some came with no gifts, just stories. He used to walk my dog when I worked double shifts. He brought my groceries upstairs every Tuesday without a word. He left a new battery in my smoke alarm. I didn't even notice until it beeped. They came like tides, soft, sure, unstoppable. Still, Mr. Halbrook never said much. Just smiled. Thanked them. Closed his eyes when they left. He didn't seem surprised they were there. But he never acted like he expected them either. It was Megan who noticed it first. One evening, she saw a small notebook tucked beneath his pillow. Nothing fancy, worn cover, soft corners, held shut with a rubber band. When she offered to move it so he could sit up, he shook his head. No, thank you. It stays with me. Curious, but respectful, she didn't press. Later, while folding his scarf, she noticed a patch of stitching. Delicate, hand-sewn, different from the rest of the coat. It was just a name, M.H., embroidered into the inner pocket. That your initials? She asked. He didn't answer right away. My wife's, he said softly. Margaret Halbrook. The way he said it made her pause. Not sorrowful, not nostalgic, just reverent. I didn't know you were married. Long time ago. She waited, unsure if more would come. When he said nothing else, she simply nodded and handed back the scarf. But something about the moment lingered. That night, while reading stories to Lila, Megan's mind wandered. She thought of the coat, the notebook, the way Mr. Halbrook watched people, not just with interest, but with memory, as if he was recording more than what he saw. The next morning, when she arrived at his room, he was already awake, notebook in hand. Do you write in that every day? She asked gently. He nodded. Mostly. What's in it? He didn't hand it to her. Just looked at her for a long time, as if weighing something quiet and heavy. Names, he said finally. And days. Things I want to make sure don't disappear. Megan sat down, heart tightening. Can I ask why? He hesitated. Then slowly, he opened the notebook and turned it around. On the first page was a list, dates and first names. Some crossed out, some circled. No last names. No addresses. Just moments frozen in time. People I helped, he said. Or meant to help. Or was too late to. She ran her finger down the page. There were dozens. Maybe hundreds. You kept track of everyone. No, he said. Just the ones who didn't notice. She looked up. People think I did these things because I was kind, he continued. But I did them because I needed to. Because after Margaret passed, I didn't want to stop caring about the world, even if the world stopped caring about me. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a monologue. It was a truth, laid bare like a garden dug in spring. She always said, he added quietly, that love doesn't have to be loud to last. Megan blinked quickly, fighting back something sharp behind her eyes. I wish I'd known her, she said. She'd have liked you, he said. You remind me of her. After that, he let her hold the notebook. Inside were sketches, some rough, some detailed. A child holding a balloon, a mailbox, a pair of mittens, a porch light left on, bits of people he'd helped, pieces of moments he refused to let vanish. I thought you didn't want to be remembered, she said. I don't, he replied. I just don't want to forget. Later that week, one of the nurses asked for his emergency contact again. He scribbled something on a post-it and passed it over. It said, if I don't wake up, give the notebook to the girl with the muffins. No name. Just that. He didn't plan to die, but he planned to be forgotten the right way. It was Megan who changed that. The next morning, she arrived with a box of new notebooks. You've got more people to write, she said. He smiled, took one gently, and opened it to the first page. April 12th, he wrote. Today, someone gave me paper to keep remembering. They said nothing else that morning, but something in the room was different. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, but full. Later, when the nurse came in, she found Megan asleep in the chair, notebook still open in her lap, and Mr. Halbrook humming softly to himself. A song no one else knew. A lullaby he hadn't sung since the day Margaret left. The hospital didn't know what to do with the attention. Room 114 had become a revolving door of neighbors, children, shopkeepers, and people from blocks away. They didn't bring flowers. They brought memory. A story. A moment. The hall outside his room became a gallery of quiet gratitude. One nurse began pinning the notes to a corkboard. He fixed our porch light. He helped my dog while I gave birth. He made the city smaller by simply showing up. People had passed him for years, at the grocery store, on sidewalks, at the bus stop. They never knew who he was. They only remembered what he did after someone else mentioned it. And one by one, the pieces clicked. I thought I imagined that bread on my porch. No, he brought it to me too, when I was sick. He carried my son's backpack for 3 weeks while his cast healed. I thought he worked for the school. No one had put it all together until now. They hadn't seen a man doing good. They'd seen moments. And now, the man behind those moments had a name, a face, and a hospital bed. It was Lila who started the board of drawings. She came every day with a new picture, sometimes Mr. Halbrook with a cape, sometimes with a cat, once with wings. I think he's magic, she whispered to a nurse. But the kind that doesn't sparkle. The kind that remembers. Meanwhile, Megan took on the quiet work of tending to the tenders. She made coffee for the visitors who stayed too long, brought extra scarves to the shivering ones who walked from far away. She never asked why people came. She just asked who they were to him. The stories were never loud. He gave me a ride when my car broke down. He fixed my gate at 5 a.m. and left before I could say thanks. He left books in my mailbox that matched what I was going through. I never told anyone what I was going through. The notebook filled fast, and Megan realized he hadn't just kept their names. He had remembered their needs. And somehow, without being asked, he had met them. A man named Theo arrived one afternoon with an envelope. Inside was a photo of Mr. Halbrook in a crisp uniform, saluting beside a row of mailboxes. He trained me, Theo said. He used to say, "Mail is trust. You're not just carrying letters. You're carrying pieces of people's lives." He paused. I never got that until now. Megan passed the photo to Mr. Halbrook, who smiled. "You still walk your route?" he asked. Theo laughed. "No, I drive now. But I remember what you said. Every single day." The photo was pinned to the board. Next to it, someone added a map, small pins marking where Mr. Halbrook had once delivered mail. They thought it would cover a street or two. By the time they finished, it covered half the town. He hadn't just been a man who helped his neighbors. He had been everywhere. Someone else brought in a local newsletter clipping. It was over 30 years old. A black and white photo of a young woman in a wedding dress, holding a bouquet. In the bottom corner, Mr. Halbrook stood, just out of focus, smiling. "Wait," Megan said. "Was he in this wedding?" "No," the woman said. "He just showed up when the photographer's assistant bailed, held the light reflector for 2 hours. Quietly. Didn't want to be paid." More people nodded. More clippings arrived. It turned out, the man they thought had no footprint had left hundreds, not in fame, but in fingerprints. Kindness pressed into the corners of people's lives, invisible until it was finally held up to the light. Then came the child. He was no longer a child, really, maybe 17 now. His name was Reuben. He came alone, dressed in a school uniform and holding a single photograph. In it, a tiny boy, bald, hooked to IVs, sitting on a bench with Mr. Halbrook beside him, feeding pigeons. "He came every week," Reuben said softly. "When I had chemo, no one in the room spoke. I didn't want to eat. He brought bread. I didn't want to talk. He brought silence. I didn't want to hope, but he never let me feel forgotten." He turned to Megan. "No one ever stayed as long as he did. Not even some of the nurses. I thought he was a hospital volunteer." "He was," Megan said quietly. "He just didn't sign up." That night, the board outside room 114 grew so full they had to expand to the wall. Visitors wrote directly on it. Some signed names. Some just initials. Some just drew hearts. Still, not everyone understood. One man scoffed as he passed by. People acting like he cured cancer or something. He just shoveled snow. Megan didn't respond this time. But Lila did. "He shoveled love," she said. And even the man didn't have a reply for that. Back in the room, Mr. Halbrook remained quiet. Not from weakness, but from wonder. "I didn't think they'd remember," he whispered one evening. "You didn't do it to be remembered," Megan said. "That's exactly why they do." He nodded slowly. "It's strange." "What is?" "All these years, I thought I was invisible. Turns out, I was just quiet." And quiet things, she said, hold up the loudest ones. For the first time since arriving, he wept, not from pain, not from loneliness, but from the sheer weight of being seen, finally, for exactly who he'd always been. The news spread faster than anyone expected. A quiet hospital room, a man who once walked male routes, a neighborhood showing up for someone they'd nearly forgotten. It was the kind of story people didn't know they needed. By the end of the week, it had made the local paper. The headline read, "The Man Who Never Asked, How a Town Found Its Heart in Room 114. There was a photo, Mr. Halbrook, smiling faintly from his hospital bed, surrounded by hand-drawn pictures, thermoses, and one small, scrappy notebook. People cried over coffee reading that story. Others rolled their eyes. Not everyone liked it. "This feels exaggerated," someone posted online. "Just a nice old guy, not a saint. Feels like everyone's jumping on some kindness bandwagon. You don't get medals for being decent." Probably made half of it up. No proof. Just stories. In the same feed where his picture warmed hearts, skepticism grew like mold in the corners. A few influencers used the story to boost their own brands. One woman posted a video titled, "I Know the Truth About Mr. Halbrook." She didn't. She once passed him on the street. Another local councilman reposted the article, but with a footnote. "We should celebrate real contributors, like public servants, not just feel-good legends." That one stung, because no one could deny it. Halbrook had once been exactly that, a public servant, for over 30 years, with no scandal, no awards, no official thanks. The internet did what the internet does. Memes began to surface. Some kind, others sarcastic. A picture of him with angel wings. A TikTok dance to Snow Shovel Shuffle. One post labeled him the ghost grandpa of gratitude. The tone had shifted. And then came the podcast. A Community Watch host invited a guest to debate the myth. They questioned the narrative, suggested he was part of a local cult of personality, claimed that people like him manipulate emotions to get attention later in life. It was nonsense, but nonsense, as it often does, made noise. Megan didn't hear it right away. She was too busy, balancing visits, helping nurses, making sure Lila wasn't absorbing too much of the weight. But one night, while scrolling for an update on his condition, the video autoplayed, and her stomach turned. She clicked through dozens of comments. Some defended him. Others laughed. Many just speculated. They didn't know him. Not really. But they acted like they did. That night, she printed the worst posts and brought them to the hospital. She didn't show them to him. She showed them to the wall. Then she covered them, one by one, with a new drawing from Lila. A thank you note. A photo of someone he'd helped. And slowly, the ugliness disappeared beneath kindness, like vines growing over stone. Still, the doubt had been planted. Even within the hospital, a few volunteers whispered, "Why him? Is this real? Do we even know if he did all that?" Megan overheard it all. And so did he. One day, while the sun broke through the window, Mr. Halbrook asked the nurse if she believed the things people were saying. She didn't answer right away. "I don't know all the stories," she admitted, "but I know the way people walk out of this room, like they're holding something heavy and holy, and I trust that." He nodded, but later that night, when he thought no one was looking, he folded his notebook closed and turned it face down on the tray. It was subtle, but Megan noticed, and it made her furious. That same evening, she went live, not on a big platform, just a short video to her friends and neighbors. She stood on her porch and spoke clearly. "No, he's not a saint. Saints don't shovel your walkway before dawn and vanish. Saints don't carry groceries or fix broken chairs. Saints don't leave soup on your porch or batteries in your flashlight. People do. Ordinary people. And maybe we forgot how extraordinary that is." She ended the video simply. "His name is Mr. Halbrook, and he gave without asking. The least we can do is not let someone take that from him." It was shared over 10,000 times in 2 days. More people came to visit, quietly, without hashtags. They didn't post selfies. They brought food, books, a song on cassette, a chair someone thought he might like once he got home. The hospital had to assign a volunteer to manage the foot traffic. But the internet, being the internet, struck again. Someone dug up an old court record. Not a crime, just a property dispute from over a decade ago. A technicality, a misfiled address. Nothing serious, but they framed it as drama. Another blog hinted that he might have once taken money from a neighbor. No evidence, just speculation from a neighbor angry about parking. It was exhausting, but it didn't undo what had been done, because something stronger had taken root. One morning, the corkboard was gone. In its place, a new wall, painted soft gray. Dozens of names now etched into it. Not of famous people, not even just people he helped, but people who decided they would do one kind thing this week, because of him. The Halbrook wall of small deeds. It spread beyond the hospital. Photos were posted from libraries, schools, even a gas station. People writing on napkins, on notebooks, on chalkboards. Helped carry groceries. Walked my neighbor's dog. Called my mom. First time in years. The world, for a moment, pushed back against the ugliness. Not with rage. Not with outrage. But with kindness. Exactly the way he would have done it. Back in room 114, Megan read him some of the notes. He smiled. "That's what matters," he said. "You sure?" she asked. "They can rewrite the story all they want," he said. "The truth's in the hands, not the headlines." And that night, without asking, he picked up his notebook again. He wrote, April 27th. They tried to erase the quiet, but the quiet wrote back. It started with one voice. Not loud, not dramatic, just a message posted late at night by a teenager who had once seen Mr. Halbrook fix a broken bench outside the school. "I never said thank you, but he made that spot safe again. That mattered to me." No hashtags, no taglines, just truth. The next day, another post appeared. A single mother. "He used to carry my stroller up the library stairs. Every Tuesday. I never asked. He just did it." Then a grocery store cashier. "He left a note when my father passed. We weren't close, but he remembered." And then the voices came like rain. Steady, quiet, unstoppable. An old voicemail was shared of him calling to check on someone's elderly aunt. A blurry photo of him holding a ladder while someone changed a light bulb. A memory from a college student who used to see him sweep leaves off the public bus stop every morning without fail. None of these stories were remarkable on their own. That was the magic. He hadn't saved a city or stopped a flood. He hadn't made speeches or led a march. He had just noticed and acted. Each voice, on its own, might have been lost in the noise. But together, they built something undeniable. A mosaic of memory. A neighborhood waking up. One former neighbor posted, "We moved away 5 years ago, but I still remember the way he used to walk in the morning. He waved at every kid on our street, even when they were too cool to wave back." Another wrote, "I never knew his name, but I knew he cared if my porch light was out." Soon, a public spreadsheet was started. Where did Mr. Halbrook touch your life? It filled faster than anyone expected. Not with donations, not with viral attention, with lines like, "He brought me bread when I was unemployed. He waited with me when I was scared to walk home in the dark. He watered my plants while I was in surgery." A local barista printed out the stories and taped them around the counter. People ordered coffee and left in tears. A boy stood at the hospital wall for 10 minutes before finally scribbling. "He tied my shoe when it came undone, and I was too nervous to ask." That was it. That was all he needed to say. People began to ask themselves questions they hadn't asked in years. Who are the quiet people I've ignored? What moments have I mistaken for background noise? Have I ever looked away from someone who was looking out for me? And the answers weren't always comfortable. The principal at the local school wrote a letter to the district. He volunteered unofficially for years. No badge, no credit, but he was there every week. I can't believe I never said anything out loud. The mayor, after seeing the growing wall of memories, declared a neighborhood day of thanks. But it wasn't a ceremony. There were no speeches, no banners. It was just people showing up. With dishes, with rakes, with blankets, with apologies. And then came the video. An old woman from the retirement home uploaded it, blurry, with shaky hands, filmed years ago. It showed Mr. Halbrook sitting beside her, helping her read a letter from her son. He wasn't speaking. He was just tracing the words with his finger as she mouthed them quietly. It went viral, not because it was shocking, but because it was true. It captured what people had felt, but never known how to say. That the people who stay in the background are sometimes holding the whole story together. It wasn't about Mr. Halbrook anymore. It was about every janitor who remembered your name. Every neighbor who picked up your trash when it tipped. Every crossing guard who stayed 5 minutes longer. Every bus driver who smiled even when no one else did. The voices didn't just speak up. They lifted each other. And for the first time, people started looking around, really looking, to see who else had gone unnoticed. Some wrote notes to their mail carriers. Others left thank you cards for their maintenance staff. A little girl walked across the street to hug the man who walked his dog every day, even though she didn't know his name, because now she knew what to look for. One hospital orderly passed Mr. Halbrook's door one night and paused. She hadn't said anything yet, but she'd been reading the wall. She stepped inside and whispered, "You reminded me that quiet isn't the same as invisible." He looked at her, eyes kind and tired, and he said the words that had stayed folded in his heart for years. "You were never invisible. You were just waiting to be seen." She cried. Not loudly. Not for long. Just enough. That night, someone added a new sign to the wall. This is not about one man. It's about every moment we let go unsaid. Let's start saying them. It was never supposed to come back. That's what made his kindness real. He gave it away like breath, simple, unnoticed, constant. He never waited for applause. Never left space for it. But when it finally returned to him, it didn't knock. It walked right in. It started with the chair. Someone had left it in his hospital room, padded, soft-backed, sturdy. A small card was taped to the arm, so you don't have to sit up in bed all the time. Jay. No one knew who Jay was, but Mr. Halbrook smiled when he saw it. "Jerome," he said softly. He used to bring his mother in for checkups. Sat on the floor when there were no chairs. That afternoon, someone else brought socks, thick, woolen, handmade. Then came a radio, a new notebook, a thermos identical to the one he used to leave for others. The nurses stopped trying to keep track. It wasn't just gifts. It was presents. People didn't ask if they could come in. They asked how he was sleeping, what he wanted for breakfast, if he preferred jazz or silence. Someone began trimming his fingernails, gently, while chatting about the weather. Someone else rubbed lotion into his hands without a word. It wasn't care out of duty. It was recognition, given back. And then the soup arrived, delivered in quiet intervals, in containers marked with initials. Megan recognized at least 5 handwriting styles. One bowl tasted exactly like something from a Vietnamese takeout spot. Another matched the lamb stew from Mrs. Patel's garden party years ago. One night, he sipped slowly and said, "This is Eileen's soup. I gave her the recipe after her husband passed. She said she'd never cook again." She had. For him. The kindness kept spreading. A woman came in with a folded quilt. "He once brought me a blanket during a snowstorm. I've been keeping this one warm for years. It's his now." One man brought 3 replacement shovels. "He gave me mine during the blackout," the man explained. Said he had another. He didn't. The story spread beyond the neighborhood. A letter came from a man 3 towns over. "Your friend once helped me push my car when it stalled on a bridge. I never caught his name, but I never forgot his face." Another came from a woman in another state. "He found my dog in a rest stop parking lot while visiting his cousin. Stayed with her 4 hours until we drove back from a different city. I never thanked him properly." Each day brought something, a photo, a message, a name someone hadn't said out loud in years. Lila made a wall in his room out of her drawings. One was of him walking across the sky with a bag full of stars. He gave them away one by one, she said, so people wouldn't be in the dark. On Wednesday, the school brought in a class project. 10 things Mr. Halbrook taught us about being kind. It wasn't dramatic. It was things like, show up quietly, carry heavy things for people, No names even when they don't know yours. Say goodnight to the world even if it doesn't say it back. By Thursday, the hospital had renamed the quiet wing hallway. They called it the Halbrook Walk. Not because it was grand, but because it reminded people to slow down, to notice, to remember. Someone left shoes at the door for him, soft-soled slippers. Someone else cleaned the windows. Someone repaired the ceiling fan that had buzzed for years. No one asked for instructions. They just showed up. The janitor who used to mop the floor outside his room began pausing by the door, just long enough to nod. One afternoon, a boy about 9 walked in and stood beside the bed. "I brought you a rock," he said. "A rock?" Mr. Halbrook smiled. "Yeah," the boy said. "It's warm now, but it was cold this morning. You can hold it when you're tired." The rock stayed on the bedside table from then on, not because it was useful, but because someone had thought of it. And then came the envelope. No name, no address, just a message. "You helped my brother when no one else did. He didn't make it, but you sat with him when the ambulance took too long. He wasn't alone. I just wanted you to know that." Mr. Halbrook read it twice, then once more, then folded it and placed it in the back of his notebook. "I never thought it would return like this," he told Megan one morning. "Not all at once." She smiled. Maybe that's how love works. Quiet when it leaves, loud when it comes home. He nodded slowly. "I used to think kindness disappeared, but maybe it just waits." They sat in silence for a while after that, just listening to the hallway sounds. Footsteps, laughter, someone humming. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I gave them pieces. I didn't know they'd save them." Outside, the wall of notes grew again. People added not just what he did, but what they'd done because of him. "Today, I forgave someone. Because he would've. I called my dad. We hadn't spoken in years. I bought coffee for the nurse who looked tired. I let someone in line in front of me, even though I was late. I stayed, just like he did." The kindness that came back didn't look like a parade. It looked like a neighborhood coming home. One bowl of soup, one rock, one quilt at a time. By the time spring folded into summer, the hospital windows opened to leaden birdsong. The scent of blooming things drifted into room 114. Mr. Halbrook sat by the window now, not because he was waiting for something, but because he liked how light moved across the floor in the mornings. He'd been moved to a long-term recovery wing, not because he was getting worse, just because the hospital no longer had a reason to rush him out. The room was his now, not just in name, but in rhythm. His slippers by the bed, his radio tuned to soft jazz, the notebook always within reach. He didn't ask for anything. Still, things arrived. Someone brought him fresh flowers every Thursday. No note, no name. Once a week, a new mug appeared. All different. One read, "Still watching." Another, "Small things matter." Another had no words, just a drawing of a shovel and a star. He sipped from each one like it had always been his. Megan still came, though not every day now. She had found balance again, work, life, a rhythm that no longer felt like survival. And still, she made time for him, not out of obligation, because she wanted to. Sometimes they just sat and watched the clouds. One Tuesday, a nurse brought a surprise. "We had a call," she said, holding an envelope. "Someone wanted to donate something in your name." He opened it slowly. Inside was a single typed letter and a check. "For benches in the park," it read, "so someone else can sit with a stranger and find peace." A girl who used to be afraid of the dark. He didn't cry. He just folded the paper and held it to his chest. Later that week, the mayor visited again, this time without reporters. Just him and a thermos of coffee. "I didn't know," he admitted. "I walked past you for years." Halbrook smiled. "Everyone does. That's no excuse." "No," he said gently, "but it's also not the end." They drank in silence. Then the mayor reached into his pocket and handed him a key. "It's symbolic," he said, embarrassed, but it felt right. Halbrook turned it in his hand. "What's it open?" "Nothing, actually. But it means we remember now. That matters." He placed the key beside the notebook. No fanfare. Just a quiet nod. And then, one by one, they began to return. People from earlier parts of the story. Mrs. Patel brought a tray of tea. You remember my husband's birthday. I never forgot that. Theo came back in uniform, smiling. Still walking mail, sir. Even the boy with the airplane, now taller, sat by the bed and showed him a new model. I don't tape them anymore. I fix them properly now. But not everyone came to apologize. Some just came to sit. Some just came to sit, like the man who once questioned him, the neighbor who posted an ugly comment, the teacher who ignored him for years. They didn't ask for forgiveness. They didn't need to. One simply said, I didn't see you before. I do now. Another said, I think I needed someone to notice me back then. I just didn't realize you had. Halbrook listened to each. He didn't rescue them with words. He just held space. Because that's what he'd always done. One evening, Lila came with a box. Inside were dozens of drawings. I saved them, she said proudly. Because maybe someday, someone will ask me what magic looked like. He chuckled. And what will you say? She thought about it, then whispered. It looked like a man with soft shoes and stars in his pocket. That night, Megan stayed late. When the hospital quieted and the lights dimmed, she sat beside his bed and watched him sleep. Not because she was worried, because she didn't want to miss anything. She thought about how he never asked for attention, how he never asked for anything really. And yet somehow, he'd received everything a person could want. Warmth, memory, company, peace. The next morning, he woke early, watched the light crawl across the floor again, then turned to the window and smiled. He whispered something. No one heard it clearly, but Megan liked to believe it was, "Thank you for noticing."